Executive dysfunction's real mean, do you know that? So, long story short, I was supposed to have a different video out by now that is still currently a while out because I have no work ethic to speak of and decided to start clearing out my Steam library instead. So, and this is the first and last time I will ever say this in my life, it's a good thing the gamers found me with my last video, because now I get to try to make lemonade out of some real scuffed lemons. Important to note, I have not beaten or gotten super in depth with all of these games, some I don't think I've even gotten halfway through yet, so don't take anything I say today too seriously. These are more comedic overviews than proper critiques, and there will no doubt be a ton I'm missing. But hopefully they'll introduce you to something neat. And me to a fucking day planner.
And if you do drugs, you go to hell before you die.
Intravenous is a Hotline Miami-like that sets itself apart from its contemporaries with a focus on stealth, open sprawling levels, and being given away for free. I promise I play other kinds of games too, money's just kinda tight right now. The other thing that sets it apart though is the disclaimer you get right as you boot it up, which is a message directly from the dev stating he does not condone going out into the streets at night to gun down drug addicts. This is because in this game you play as a man that goes out into the streets at night to gun down drug addicts, which is definitely an interesting setup for your stealth action game. He claims it's not reflective of his views and is only a justification for the gameplay to happen, but I feel like there are other ways to contextualize a game where you sneak around killing dudes in tactical gear. An entire genre of ways, one might say, though I guess those aren't really non-political. That said, I do not consider myself qualified to get into that in any depth. I don't know the guy and I'm willing to take his word on it, seeing as the protagonist does seem to be portrayed as something of a fucking maniac. I will, however, be taking the piss out of it wherever applicable, because in a world of this game was created by a multicultural team of predators and victims, yada yada yada, seeing at no point in this game's story do I, the developer, encourage you, the player, to take hostile actions against drug addicts, hits you like a tasing. But I digress. We play as possibly a Marine, but the game never specifies, so he could just be some fucking guy, Steve White Duterte Robinson, in his mission to avenge his brother who, after a night of drinking and pissing with the door open, was killed right in front of him by a bunch of junkies. Enabled in his obsession by a rich anonymous benefactor who appears to be Kurt Cobain, Steve's warpath leads him from simply icing the crackheads that killed his brother to a full-on assault on a large-scale drug operation. A setup that makes it especially surprising that this, of all Hotline Miami successors, is the one that gives you the option to go non-lethal. Well, non-lethal, we'll get to that. Starting off, the first thing that stuck out to me is just how intricate the stealth system is, with the game slapping your HUD with a whole heart rate monitor's worth of meters on the bottom left. You got your health and ammo, sure, but then there's also how visible you are, how much noise you're making, which includes things like picking locks, attacking, and walking on different surfaces. To which end you have a full spectrum of walk speeds with different noise levels, as well as multiple tiers of body armor, which trade varying levels of discretion for protection. You can throw distractions, turn off or shoot out lights, melee from behind for instant knockouts. Hell, even your weapon selection, while primarily lethal, has a good amount of utility and non-lethal options, which makes it even more of a bummer how frustrating stealth in this game can be. But before I elaborate, this is the game in this video I have the least complete experience with by far. I have gotten halfway through on a non-lethal stealth run on true difficulty, which is a very small fraction of what this game has to offer, as indicated by both what appears to be a stealth game political compass you get at the end of each level, and the legitimately absurd amount of difficulty and gameplay customization options the game gives you. So take this section with the biggest pinch of salt. But in my limited experience on what the game refers to as the intended difficulty, stealth is very often kind of a pain in the ass. Right from the first level, enemies are bizarrely intense and thorough in their behavior, with a bunch of barely functional drug addicts for some reason having regimented patrol routes and exceptional spatial awareness. If they notice the smallest thing out of place, they will immediately go to investigate. And even if they find nothing, they somehow still deduce that somebody has been here and go around alerting all the other enemies to join in on the search. At which point you sigh and either reset to your last save or just go guns blazing. The latter possibly being a lot harder than you might think, since if you went in intending to stealth, you likely picked the weaker armor that made less noise and didn't bother with the better guns. And maybe there's a way to maintain stealth even after they're on high alert or spot you once, but none that I could find. Since once they enter high alert, I don't know that I've ever seen them leave it. Which I know must have been the wind, is kind of a meme, but like, games do that for a reason. Again, it's very possible I'm missing something that would make this click. Like, I hope I am. Because the amount of love and work that must have gone into making Hotline Miami this much more complex while still keeping it largely functional is massively impressive in and of itself. And I know that if I spent enough time futzing around with the difficulty options, I might find a version of this game that I love, but I just don't think I vibed with it enough to want to put in that work. But hey, if living the true red-blooded American experience of shooting ranges, dare campaigns, and drinking yourself unconscious on light beer sounds interesting to you, do check it out. There is legitimately a ton to dig into.
I was just showing Craig that this kung fu move called the Fist of Silence.
A weirdo beat 'em up with outstanding style that I really wanted to like more than I actually did. That's not to say it's bad, it's got plenty going for it. The presentation, for one, as I just said. Both visuals and audio are pretty fantastic right out the gate. Like, listen to this. Its difficulty options, while not as intimidatingly expansive as Intravenous, give you multiple axes to adjust your experience with. An experience that starts out pretty solid. You play as the Wanderer, a vagrant that survives living on his blasted desert home planet through his pacifist fighting style, which consists of adhering to pacifism via dodges and parries until either the other guy tires out and falls over, or your super meter charges up and you get one smack with the might of Zeus for being such a good boy.
God said he'd teach me karate.
And like any game with heavy emphasis on parries, it is, in fact, a rhythm game in disguise. Identify attack patterns based on enemy type and race? Don't think about it too hard. And respond accordingly as new types are introduced and mix and match with older ones to throw you off. And this loop works fairly well for a lot of the game, with you pretty quickly settling into a nice rhythm, but being kept on your toes by a consistent stream of new enemies. But this is a rhythm with a lot of lulls. For one, enemies are really rigid in their behavior, which is kind of necessary given you need to be able to rely on the rhythm being consistent for the game to function, but it gets to the point where you can sometimes end up having to wait for them to get to a certain point in their routine before you can actually make any progress against them. Another side effect of this rigidity is that, especially when you're down to the last enemy in any given section, you can end up feeling like you're just going through the motions waiting for them to fall over. Just in general, the nature of the game requires you to play kind of passively unless you have a super charged up, which you then use to essentially skip parts of the gameplay. And while it does introduce harder to parry patterns via new enemies, some of those have the side effect of being kind of annoying to take down, because many of them just don't tire out, and so have to be dispatched by charging a super and hitting them with it, which they make very annoying to do. So, broadly speaking, if the thing that draws you to beat 'em ups is either mindless mashing or the potential for creative expression via sick combos, this is not your game. But if you vibe with the aesthetic and really like parrying, or just want a weird experimental take on the genre, Way of the Passive Fist is definitely worth a look.
Big ass metal piston spike. Big ass metal piston spike.
Ooh, alright, this is the good shit. SANABI is a 2D action platformer with a grappling hook. Depending on the type of person you are, that might be all you needed to hear. But in case your neural pathways take slightly more than 2 words to get firing, this is one of those games that make that one Spider-Man 2 clip make sense.
This is the greatest game of all time.
You run around a bit, deploy the grapple, swing, and like warm fucking butter. That shit that makes the toes curl. A short adjustment period and you're flying across levels like Nathan Spencer with a coke addiction and a less complicated marriage. Grapple, retract, swing, boost your swing to do full 360s around platforms and come at enemies from any angle. It's all the joy of spinning your belt around like nunchucks without the stinging ache of accidentally nailing yourself in the nuts with the buckle. Well, save for a couple of late game boss fights, which can represent either a significant difficulty spike or a fight that should have been like half as long as it actually was, given how its multiple phases don't really do anything new. The final boss being particularly guilty of the former in ways I can't get into without spoilers. Just be aware you're gonna have to get real comfortable with the new ability you get in the final area if you want to win. And said ability can be really unwieldy. Spoilers that I did not expect to give much of a shit about, given the generic setup of a soldier on a death march to avenge his cloyingly angelic daughter and the sometimes kinda stilted translation from Korean. But I was completely invested by the end, thanks to a twist that, while not really subtle or hard to see coming at all, still hit incredibly hard, helped in no small part by the art and animation work, which you really wouldn't expect from a game where the characters are small enough on screen that half of them just don't have faces. But the artists here do so much with so little, it's legitimately incredible. The music also fucks with one of my favorite uses of a leitmotif I have experienced in recent memory, which I also can't elaborate on for spoiler reasons. This is probably gonna be the shortest section of the video because I honestly don't have a ton to say about it, it's just really fucking good. It's also only 8 to 10 hours long and priced like an indie pixel platformer, so absolutely check it out. The easiest recommend of this entire video.
Impressive. Very nice. Let's see Paul Allen's card.
Actually, you know what? This might be the shortest section of the video. Because despite this being the game I put by far the most hours into on 2 separate platforms, I was perhaps the last person on Earth to learn how fucking good Slay the Spire is. So there's not really much that's left to be said, except that I have never been able to get into a trading card game in my entire life, and it still got its hooks into me almost immediately. It is not hard to tell why Slay the Spire spawned an entire genre that it still stands at the apex of to this day. But if you somehow live under a bigger, damper rock than I do, or go outside sometimes, I guess, Slay the Spire is a roguelike deck builder. Depending on the type of person you are, that might be enough for you to close this video and mail a pipe bomb to my house. To which I would respond, eat shit, I picked up fossilized healing. You pick a character from a selection ranging from Fighter-Man with demonic powers to a malfunctioning robot sorcerer with claws like a fucking Digimon, get a starter deck, and use it to deal and block damage. That's more or less all the tutorial the game gives you. Break a leg. Preferably this bird dude's. Everything else is trickled to you via tooltips, and the card text is kept to an absolute minimum, as mandated by one of the devs who is stated to dislike card games. Which, however that works, thank God. So what that leaves you with is what feels like an idiot-proof card game that still manages a ludicrous amount of strategic depth and build variety, which is about the extent to which I can comment on the design, seeing as I am the idiot they needed to proof for. So I'll just leave off by saying the art style's kinda scuffed, but it grows on you, and they should make the Hermit fan mod into an official character in the sequel. And speaking of the sequel, where is my son, Megacrit? I know he's in there. You wouldn't have this in your FAQ if he wasn't. Show him to me, please. Is he eating well? Where are you keeping him? So yeah, good game. But you probably either already knew that or have never vibed with the genre and don't plan to change that. In which case, I hope one of the other games I played instead of working on videos seemed interesting to you. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to punch my Ritalin prescription until it fixes my productivity without me having to restructure my life in any meaningful way. Consider supporting me on Patreon, like these wonderful people, to be disappointed even faster. See you soon. Hopefully.